Well, hello. We are here with the Global Church Forum, and once again, we have Illaria. And so I think a lot of times when I last talked with Illaria, she was in Singapore. Now you're living currently in San Francisco. How are you, Illaria?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, currently, actually, since the past year and a half, I've been based out of San Francisco Bay Area, but working still very closely with everything in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. And for those who don't understand, it's usually about 12, 13 hours apart. So for you, wow, for you, probably about 9 hours apart. So a lot of, is it early morning? Are you more of a night person? You're more an early person,
We're
Illaria?
more like 15 hours apart, and I guess the pandemic has made everybody digital for the most part, and when you do that, then you just adjust to the time around the clock. But technology has made it easy.
Yeah. Simple thing before we dive in. You are the chairperson of the board for Tech for Good Institute, which we're going to talk a little bit about that. You're a group advisor in tech and social impact for Grab. But one question is, even in terms of what you're hearing, like in light of COVID with all of the vaccine, it was so easy to get in the US. Are you finding, was it hard to find in places like Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I mean, the borders have been closed for the most part to a lot of countries. I think it still is, even though they're trying to open up with certain passageways with cities like Hong Kong. But yeah, I mean, going into Asia is very hard. Coming into the US isn't.
Yeah. Hey, for you as well too, for those who are not familiar, Grab, we're familiar with Uber and Lyft here in the US. What is Grab?
Sure. So Grab is a currently valued at $40 billion super app. Super app meaning it has multiple functions. So it started off 9 years ago as kind of the Uber of Southeast Asia, ride hailing, and then added on financial services, for example, payments, wallet, lending products, wealth management product, microinsurance. We're also a delivery platform where we do food delivery, where we do grocery delivery. We also have partnerships doing telemedicine in Indonesia. So it's kind of like a Uber, PayPal, DoorDash, all wrapped in one. Yeah.
Yeah. When it first started, was it everything like that, or did
No,
it get
no.
built on over time?
Yeah, when they started in 9 years ago, it was just mobility. It was just ride
Yeah.
hailing, and then later on, responding to the social needs in Southeast Asia and the 8 countries that Grab operates in, they
Yeah.
started adding in different verticals.
Which, in some sense, one of the things I've heard about Grab is it did really, really well in contextualizing to the needs of the people in that city. What does that mean for you, Ilaria?
Well, it when I mean, for people who have been to Southeast Asia, they would realize actually, even though a 45-minute plane ride could mean something very different, right? You
Yeah.
go to Indonesia, Malaysia. There is a strong kind of religion culture. You go to Philippines, there's a completely different kind of culture, and then you go to Vietnam, again, completely different kind of ideology. You go to Thailand, it is very much a tourist friendly, laissez-faire. So actually all these regions, even though they group into Southeast Asia, have extremely different cultures. So that's why hyperlocalization and adapting to the culture and governments and people of each country out in Southeast Asia is very key to running a successful technology business.
Yeah. The three areas that you're familiar with, you've been a lot to Indonesia, you've lived in Singapore for a number of years, you've lived in Hong Kong. How would you describe the differences for a person listening to this? They've never really been to Southeast Asia. How would you describe each of those individual places?
Well, I don't think we have time to go into every country, but I would say, when you go to a developing country or developing city, for example, you go to Manila, you go to Jakarta, it's very different from going to Singapore and Hong Kong, where it's very developed. The infrastructure is very much advanced. You don't find yourself getting stuck in situations that are, how do you say it, inconvenient as much. And you also find a lot of people, it's about the vibrant middle class. Are people having that access to financial inclusion? Are people having bank accounts? Are people's selling bananas on the street most of the time, which you will see a lot if you drive around Philippines or you drive around Jakarta. I think that rich poor discrepancy is a problem in all of these countries, including Hong Kong. However, there's a basic level of healthcare, of employment, of social welfare, safety net from the government that one will see a differential if you go to a country, say, like Indonesia versus like a Hong Kong. But a lot of exciting growth is happening in the developing countries because they are building their middle class from scratch. And a lot of the people are skipping the whole PC era and leapfrogging using mobile technology to open their first bank accounts, to start their first business, just using a cell phone.
Correct.
So that's why it's very exciting.
Yeah. For those who have never been to any of those regions who are listening is, the one thing when you go to Singapore, you'll realize it's a smaller country, but wow, is it clean? There's no traffic. It is crazy over there. But then you go to Indonesia, it's bustling, it's busy, new road construction, everything like that, and the rise of the middle class. And you're seeing the growth of those economy. As a result, Grab itself has become just a wonderful asset within those countries. What about religion as well too, Illaria, as well too? As you attend churches here in the U.S. compared to churches in Southeast Asia, how would you describe the two differences?
I mean, there's a lot of cross-pollination. I mean, a lot of American pastors very often travel over to Asia to gift speaking engagements. And I think a lot of churches in Asia, they listen to sermons from the West. So I think there's definitely a lot of, again, digital culture. Technology has made it a lot more globalized in terms of church messages. But I will say there is a level of lack of there's a complacency, I think, in all rich countries or rich cities, right? That we do have a lot of resources. We always often pick and choose messages or pastors we want to listen to, churches we want to go to based on sometimes a very consumer mindset. Whereas in a developing country, I think that you are grateful to be included in a family, and the way people reach out to people in need are often quite real. It's often really about driving someone somewhere, helping them with food, helping them with mobility, helping them with life, and people are pretty hungry over there, meaning in a lot of these developing countries and cities, for God. And it's a different kind of landscape. I wouldn't say it's a good or bad thing. I think we're all fallen people who are hoping to be closer to God, and we're trying to figure it out a day at a time. But I think there's a hunger for sure in countries that are still lacking a lot of things.
Yeah. One of the things that you started, and I'm looking in September 2021, you became the chairperson for the Tech for Good Institute. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, Tech for Good Institute is a nonprofit think tank founded by Grab with an aim to really bring together the private and public sectors and tech companies really to look at how you can serve the nations better. How can you nation build while doing good business? There are a lot of issues surrounding the current technology platform economy. So whether it's economic, it is political or policy driven, we aim to accelerate and focus on these difficult conversations, have thought leadership element and community element to bring people together, but at the same time also capacity build and have actions that will be implemented to help the masses in these countries. So it's a think tank that has been newly established. Yeah.
What are some of the conversations like for all these people who are part of this think tank? Are governments sending people to come and be part of this think tank? Is it more made up of marketplace leaders, a combination of both?
Currently, we honestly just started. So we had two launch events, one in Singapore, one in New York, and we have partnered with Bain and Company to put out a deep dive into the technology platform economy to really include many tech companies into this conversation to sort out, hey, what do all these technology business mean for the people in these nations, and how can we make their lives better? So yes, there's government people, there's private sector people, and that's really the aim, is to have all kinds of people participate.
Yeah. Illaria, let me get your thoughts on it. In the rise of technology, we all know it's completely changed the world. It's made the world smaller. For you, as you begin to travel, you interact with different cities, you're in technology all the time. You live in San Francisco. What is your hope? What are you encouraged by when you look at technology, how it's changing, even for the gospel? But what are some of your concerns as technology rises?
Yeah. Well, very good question. I think it's whether it's religion related or not, faith related or not, technology hyper turbocharges the choice that we have. It's like a very never-ending catalog of things we can choose from. So in many ways, it's easy to distract. It's easy to compare. It's easy to even catapult your consumer mindset more because you can constantly flip to the next thing. And if we don't harness that well, if we don't have the right attitude, it can be a very exhausting and destabilizing thing, I think. But technology is neutral, like money. And I think it's about the heart of that we all have and the attitude we all have in using this tool and not let the tool use us. And so I would say it is wonderful. For example, you and I now in different cities can have this wonderful interview that could be watched by someone in Asia. This is the magic of technology, of shortening distance, democratizing platforms, democratizing access, allowing more people to have access to premium content, and to communities and to communication. So that's a wonder of technology when it's being used well. So I think with faith, it's the same thing. I mean, we think that there's an important element of faith that it requires one-on-one, person-to-person community and doing life with people. And I think that cannot be replaced by technology. But technology also is a good tool to use to keep in touch with people, communicate with people, evangelize messages, etc. But I do warn a lot of leaders out there who use it very aggressively. There is a level that is maybe too much, because I think technology does promote narcissism. I think technology promotes over focused attention on ourselves, how we're performing, how we look, how we're positioned to the world. And that is not the spirit of God's teaching. God wants us to be other-centered. So I think having that right reminder at the back of our minds will help us harness technology better.
Yeah. In terms of the future of the job market, economically, job creation, how are you seeing, if you had to sit there and look at it, how is technology going to affect jobs along the way? And how is that going to change even how we look at job creation in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I think technology, again, can create or eliminate jobs. So there are a lot of repetitive jobs back then that may no longer be required. And I do think people do get very scared about it. But like we can remind people, many years ago, there were human beings in every elevator operating an elevator. And we thought that was necessary. But because of the advancements of technology, we don't need them anymore. Now, does it mean that those people lost their jobs? Yes. But does it mean there's other jobs for them? Absolutely. So I think people's ability to constantly be learning, to upskill, to pivot, to try other things is very important, so that new jobs that are created by technology and technology related industries, they can partake in and they can be a part of. I see young people, I don't even want to speak first world language. Let's talk about third world language. I've seen people who are Grab drivers in some of these tier 2, tier 3 cities in Southeast Asia, and they just took 8-month programming courses on JavaScript and C++, and they then later on are able to get a job as a software engineer at Grab to move from blue to white collar. That's just a matter of months if you work hard. So I would encourage people not to have fear, but instead have a growth mindset and constantly upskill themselves.
Yeah. We're also seeing a lot of times, you're probably seeing a lot more than I do, even in terms of pastors as well, too. The role of the pastor is changing. There are some economies that cannot allow pastors to fully just work full time by donations. So as a result, you're going to have to wear multiple hats. You're seeing churches start new businesses. You're seeing pastors go in the area of technology, doing different things in order to earn an income, but still lead the church as well, too.
That's a wonderful point, Tommy. And I think that is essential, and for many reasons outside of just living with the technology age. I think the model of constantly looking to donors can be quite destructive. And I think that it almost prevents people from being always very honest, to speak truth into some of the large donors, because their livelihood depends on it. And that is directly in opposition with the spirit of pastorhood, is to really be shepherding and speaking truth and love to people who need to hear it. And inherently, the funding model needs to have alternatives where pastors are able to also be productive and also find sustainable ways. That's a very key buzzword these days, right? To generate income. So I think that many very interesting dialogues can be had within the global church community about these ways and how we can support different pastors and church leaders to explore different ways to get diversified income.
Yeah. One of the things that also changes our economy, or a conversation about funding, is also here in America, and you're living here in the US right now, is how we look at global missions as well too. It has always been US sends out funds, everything like that. But now more so with the rise of technology, with the rise of some of these local leaders, how do you employ those individuals? How do you come alongside those individuals? Does the funding conversation look differently than what it did 10 or 15 years ago as well too?
Again, you hit the nail on the head. There's inherently something that is not sustainable nor consequential about people using church budgets because it has to be used for missions, sending people out to a country for 10 days and thinking that they're making a lasting impact. It's actually all it is sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it's just, tourism for people going on missions that ends up being some kind of an emotional abuse to people who are in the countries or facilities that they visit, right? Imagine the orphan who gets a few hugs and photo ops from someone who visits for a week and never see them again. That doesn't change their lives. And so for sustainable impact, I think there has to be a heavy partnership with the local community so that the local community can take ownership of helping their underserved and their downtrodden. And the downtrodden people needs to feel like people actually care about them for the right reasons, not just for the people coming on missions to feel good, but really thinking what in long term can help them stand on their own feet, right? You teach people how to fish, not just throw fish at them. And I think missions as well as charities and philanthropy, everybody needs to think about addressing these problems. You've got to teach people how to fish and not just throw fish at them. Yeah.
Well, for some of you guys who are listening, I hope you don't get the sense that I'm not saying don't send out global missionaries. I think global workers is so important, especially in certain places. But let's take Indonesia as an example as well, too. I could sit there and send someone who went to seminary full-time in American university or American seminary. And then from that point on, they and their family will go to Indonesia. They have to raise $150,000 a year to be missionaries. Contrast that to somebody who came from Indonesia, studied in the US, Northwestern University, UCLA, USC, now wants to go back home and they want to do work and they want to work in the church. It becomes a little bit different. They understand the context here. They also understand the context there. Wouldn't it be easier to hire someone locally there who does have experience outside of Indonesia?
Absolutely. You're right. I'm not denouncing missions. In fact, missions is a wonderful thing. It's just more like the spirit and the strategy behind mission. I think if we view it as a one-off, let's go have fun, take a look and leave thing, it doesn't really help anyone. It just makes us feel good for a little bit. The true mission has a heart of investment and long-term servanthood to the people that you're trying to visit. Of course, it requires a vision trip first, but later on, it has to be followed up by localized, committed action to love on the people and not abandon them after visiting them shortly. So I think that is the area that one has to think deeply when considering what kind of missions to go on and where to spend money on.
Yeah. My friend Tom Lin, president of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, wrote this wonderful article. And here's a quote that I'd love to get your comment on. And he talks about how the American church needs to learn from the global church. And he says, from the global church, we could learn to hold a posture toward culture that does not withdraw from those who think and believe differently than we do. every single day as you work for Tech for Good, you work at Grab, you encounter people who are different. Skin color, religion, sex, all of those different things. As the American church, or those who are watching, what can we learn from from the global church? How do we learn to work effectively with people who are different than we are?
Yeah, well, I'll want to say it's not just, I mean, when we use the word American church, I don't want Americans to feel, being attacked. I would include myself, for example, when I grew up in Hong Kong. That's part of that culture too, being in an affluent city that has access to the West and all these resources. I will call that the branch of American church. It's an advanced, rich economy church, okay? And we're all guilty of that, of thinking that our way is better. Just, and sometimes because we think we are in more affluent, resource filled backgrounds, we think that, oh yeah, I mean, our way works. Let me tell you what to do. And I think missions or charities or humanitarian work actually requires the opposite, requires a posture of humility and wanting to learn about the problems and social needs of these people that we have no idea about, because we have clean water, we have social safety net, we have a roof over our head. We're not being raped and killed by the minute like people in India. We're not being trafficked and targeted the same way as people who are vulnerable in the slums. So we need to, first of all, put on a learning hat and not talk. And when we have enough information from learning on the field, not just on textbooks and online and talking, but on the field, then we can start thinking, how can what my resources and my skills be helpful, and how can I attach myself to intern and start integrating? And it's a long process. So I do think that, I'm involved with a few humanitarian organizations, and the first thing I do is not join their board, is to travel with them on the field for at least a few years before I even think about getting involved, before I even think about saying yes to joining their board. And I think we can all learn more coming from very blessed backgrounds. That's what I would say.
Illaria, for instance, one of the things I learned from it's been now 7 years that I've been traveling back and forth to Southeast Asia. I went there 7 years ago. I stepped foot on Jakarta, could not even tell you that there was 13,000 islands in Jakarta. It's one of the biggest cities in the world. The racial tension, I've had to learn through all that. But let's say, for instance, one of the things I learned was even on the issue of bribes, it's not a black and white issue. In the US, there are laws that protect you from bribes. There are all of that stuff. Over in different parts of the world, I just came back from Nairobi. Corruption is a big thing because bribes is a very gray area. Because sometimes you need to do certain things in order to expedite things. There are laws that doesn't protect you. And as a company, do you sacrifice a $10 million account? Do you sacrifice a $5 million account? It's not easy as don't do it, because it's not the easiest answer. There are not laws that protect you a lot of times. And I had to learn and understand what people in those situations were dealing with.
Correct. And sometimes if it's a matter of life and death, and someone has a gun to your head and says, just give me $10, maybe this is stupid to not. I mean, God always wants us to be shrewd as a serpent and innocent as a dove, according to situations. But I think if it's about advancing your business and you want to participate kind of in corrupted activities on a regular basis, then we need to really ask ourselves, as followers of Christ, how do we do that? How do we keep accountable to God? And I would say being shrewd as a serpent also means, how do you find better ways to handle the same situation? Is there a way that doesn't involve paying bribes, but you can also appeal to the destiny and desires of the corrupted officials, for example, right? Maybe they want votes, maybe they want support, maybe they want influence. Is there a healthier way to help them get to their goals? For example, helping them with charity projects, helping them with schools, helping them with, winning favor from people by helping them. Suggest the positive alternative rather than the dark alternative. And I think that is what is required of us, to actually be smart, not just follow dead old rules.
Yeah. One last quote from Tom Lin, and he writes this article and he says, when we begin to learn from the global church, when we see what God is doing globally and learn from those lessons, he writes, we will find new vibrancy, new unity, new healing, new transformation. We will find a new radiance shining from the city on the hill that testifies to Jesus's greatness and glory. When you look at what God is doing in the area of Southeast Asia, in the area of tech, Illaria, what are you encouraged by for the future?
Yeah. I'm encouraged by the fact that the world is much more democratized, that everyone actually, partly because of technology, also globalization, and the world, where the world is heading, everyone has a voice now, because anyone can have a Twitter account, anyone can have a Facebook account, and if what they say resonates, it can go viral within minutes. That's actually something that could be both dangerous but also good. That means people are being held accountable, right? People can take a video of someone who is harassing you, who is doing something illegal, post it, and immediately there is accountability and is documented and it cannot be erased. So there is something wonderful about that. I will say, if people can use this democratizing element of technology and then reflect on themselves to see if there are areas that can, whether you're running a business or a church or a nonprofit, to be more fair, to especially give voice to the voiceless and not to abuse power or authority, then we are looking at something very successful that can marry faith and technology. I also think this is also an era where our next generation demands and yearns for impact, for social contribution, for the world to be a better place, and we're finding ways to get involved. So I think that also demands us as Christians to not just preach words, but do it like God tells us to, is to help the orphans and the widows, love our neighbors, and do it with humility, do it in action, not just in words. And I think all of those things are good. Those are good pressures that are given to us in our current climate.
Good. Illaria Chan, Tech for Good Institute and Grab. Hey, as usual, thank you so much. I've learned a lot from you over these years. And so
likewise,
thanks for picking up my call every single time I call.
Of course, anytime. That is my honor. Thank you, Tommy.
We'll talk soon.